Convention is very much changed to reflect concerns about the pandemic. And instead of something that is really closer to 2 weeks long, this year it will be 4 days long, and only deputies and bishops and essential staff will be able to attend. So some of the things that happen at General Convention, the exhibits, the fantastic worship, the sense of family reunion, that is not going to happen this year, but so much else is. And I want you to know that your deputies have been working really hard for many months, attending online hearings and gathering among themselves and occasionally with me to form ourselves. And we're really honored and excited to be taking the Spirit of God that we know in Maine to the people gathered in Baltimore.
We've been meeting regularly. Just last night, we met with 2 candidates who are running to replace Gay Jennings as president of the House of Deputies. Had a chance to spend some time with 2 of them to learn a little bit more about them.
I am particularly interested in liturgy, being a clergy person. And when I talk to people and they learn that I'm going to be a deputy, the first thing they ask is, when is the prayer book going to be revised? I can tell you there were many, many resolutions coming out of that liturgy task force. How many of those make it to this convention in a 4-day span? None of us yet know. But many of those have to do with revising the prayer book in one fashion or another. One last comment, however, which is that I today went and sort of looked at all of the resolutions that are out there having to do with liturgy. And I was impressed and just wanted to pass that on at how many of those have to do with broadening inclusion and supporting our work around racial justice.
I have been watching in Committee 14, the Christian Formation and Ministry Committee, on Resolution D 030, which is about developing resources and training for welcoming and supporting transgender and non-binary persons and their families. And it was an interesting 4-hour debate, and it was accepted without amendment unanimously, and it is on the consent calendar. So again, I'm very interested in things that are about justice issues and mostly welcoming justice issues. They also passed D 072, the resolution on gender and sexuality training, which might be considered a part, like we have to search safe church training. This is another kind of training, and it without amendment went through unanimously and is on the consent calendar as well.
So A125, quote, affirms that striving to become the beloved community of Jesus is central to our baptismal vocation in God's mission. And every Episcopalian is called to a lifelong vocation of racial justice and equity and the dismantling of white supremacy. And the resolution calls for the creation of the Episcopal Coalition for Racial Equity and Justice. So I support this resolution for a number of reasons, but several of them are because it will ensure that the work of becoming beloved community will continue to be a priority of the church under whoever succeeds current presiding Bishop Michael Curry and President of the House of Deputies, Gay Clark Jennings. The fact that 1/10 of the church's trusts and endowments will be dedicated to this work, I think goes a long way towards the church's making reparations for our historic complicity with the slave trade and with displacement of indigenous peoples.
So today was the first day at General Convention, and the Maine deputation got up early, went to breakfast, then got to work, and we did all kinds of things. We had a Eucharist with the whole House of Deputies. We had lunch with our bishop, but in between those, we very powerful testimonies about anti-racism work, a commitment to give 10% of the Episcopal Church's budget, free budget to that work. Very powerful voices. And then we heard voices about the indigenous boarding schools, about Indian boarding schools, including people who had actually been at those schools, and the Episcopal Church studying that and repenting from that. In addition to that, we passed family medical leave. We passed paying for deacons so deacons could receive benefits. We included Puerto Rico into the province 2, which is New York. All kinds of fascinating and really powerful moments today. Last night when we arrived, there was actually a shooting on the street across from the hotel, and today the Bishops for Gun Violence led a protest, a prayer service, and a rally about preventing gun violence. And several hundred Episcopalians gathered at the Visitor Center for Baltimore's Inner Harbor to talk about that, to pray about that, and to sing and gather together. Just a very powerful witness of God's love here in Baltimore.
Hello Maine, it's Claudia Smith. We've just finished our third day of General Convention, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts. We're passing a lot of legislation, and I'm not going to speak to any of that because it's bouncing back and forth between the two houses. House of Bishops sends stuff to us and the House of Deputies, and then we send it back, and so on. What I wanted to say, though, is more about tenor and tone of this convention. Truly, I can say the Episcopal Church at this convention is walking the way of love. And even as they have had disagreements in the House of Deputies, it's all been very civil. And in general, everybody is really and truly trying to be the beloved community. We just have different ways of going about that.
But we then moved to some exciting news. We elected the successor to President Gay Jennings, who has served the Episcopal Church as president of the House of Deputies for 10 years. And her successor as the next president of the House of Deputies is Julia Harris.
Now to you all in the House of Deputies, I am honored to be your PHOD-elect. You have sent the message to church geeks everywhere that if you try hard and you read the canons and you read all the minutes, that you can actually make a huge difference on this church.
So that was really exciting, and she was welcomed very warmly by the House.
Talked about and working to set up, and it is endowed, but to position a desk at the church at 815 that has a desk for women's issues and LGBTQ issues, a joint desk.
Well, we voted on it, and it passed.
And that one I won.
As a first-time General Convention deputy, I thought it might be a bit intimidating, but it really wasn't. General Convention is a great example for the church of how bishops, clergy, and laity all participate equally in the business of being church. I think the most moving portion of the 4 days was on Sunday's Eucharist, when the names of women deputies between 1949 and 1970-something who had died, who had never been recognized as male deputies, have always been recognized. Their names were read out. There were women who had been elected but never seated because they were women. And women who were seated but were never honored when they died.
This is a historic General Convention, 4 legislative days, and we got it all done. I want to say something about A059, which is the piece of legislation that we passed in both houses that really provides the structural framework so that we can begin to define what it means to have a Book of Common Prayer, understanding that in 2022, books, what happens in a book is now just as much about what happens digitally. And so that work of creating a constitutional amendment, which requires 2 general conventions, and then beginning in 2024 to create canonical changes so that we can look forward, I hope, to a new prayer book in maybe as few as 9 years. We're going to share with the rest of the church and take to Lambeth an important statement about climate change. And we are excited, too, about the election of Julia Harris as the next president of the House of Deputies. I look forward to welcoming President-elect Harris to Maine. I hope that will happen very soon.
We've just concluded a COVID-shortened 4-day General Convention. Those 4 days are the accumulation of nearly 2 years of work on the part of your deputies to be ready. A couple of the highlights of General Convention, we worked on and passed 2 resolutions involving truth-telling and reckoning. The first was a resolution about extending and furthering the beloved community, and that deals with racial reconciliation. And then the second was a resolution on truth-telling about the Episcopal Church's history involving Indigenous boarding schools. And I'm happy to tell you that your deputation has represented you well.